should change it. But will they or not? And in the wake of the horrific murder of little Sarah Sharif, the Children's Commissioner says that smacking your child needs to finally be banned in England. Do you agree with that or not? And the person who threw a milkshake at Nigel Farage has avoided jail. He says that's evidence of two-tier justice. Is he right? And speaking of Reform UK, Harriet Harman says that they are a risk to British democracy. Is she right? All of that and lots more. There's been a lot happening today, I can tell you. And look who's keeping me company. My panel, Alex Dean, the political consultant, and Krish Krandia, the cultural commentator. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Good evening. It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines on GB News. The alleged Chinese spy linked to Prince Andrew has said he did nothing wrong or unlawful after he was named publicly for the first time. In a statement, Yang Tengbo added that the widespread description of me as a spy is entirely untrue. The High Court lifted a ban on naming Yang, described as a close contact of the Duke, after rejecting his bid for anonymity. The 50-year-old, who was banned from Britain on national security grounds, ran a lobbying firm with ties to Beijing, Westminster and royal circles. Yang reportedly attended the Duke's birthday party in 2020 and helped organise a UK-China business summit. Pressure to reveal his identity mounted after Reform UK's Nigel Farage vowed to name him in Parliament. Meanwhile, this morning, Sir Keir Starmer defended the government's China policy.
It's important to engage. Of course we have to challenge where we must, but it's better to engage to challenge than to stay aside, as it were. Important to cooperate where we can on issues like climate change, which need that cooperation. So I'm very pleased with the engagement and the progress that we've made.
Meanwhile, the Duke of York will not join the royal family for Christmas at Sandringham. That's according to sources. It's understood both Prince Andrew and his ex-wife, the Duchess of York, have decided to avoid the annual family gathering amid the ongoing scandal over the Duke's close links to the alleged Chinese spy. It comes after the Duke was urged to do the right thing and maintain a low profile over the Christmas period to avoid causing further embarrassment to the King. In other news, killer nurse Lucy Letby's legal team has said they'll be asking the Court of Appeal to immediately review all her convictions because an expert witness has now changed his mind on the cause of the death of 3 babies. Her new lawyer, Mark MacDonald, said Dr. Dewey Evans had told the jury Letby had injected air down a nasal gastric tube, leading to the death of the 3 babies. But he said Dr. Evans has now changed his mind. Letby is serving 15 whole life terms in prison for the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 7 others while working at the Countess of Chester Hospital in 2015 and 2016. A snap election has been triggered in Germany after Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost a vote of confidence in Parliament. The German Chancellor called today's vote, which he lost, paving the way to an early election on the 23rd of February next year. It follows the collapse of Scholz's 3-party coalition government, which left the embattled Chancellor leading a minority administration. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Michelle.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got my panel, Alex Dean, the political consultant, and Krish Krandia, the cultural commentator. Good evening, gents, to both of you. You're very welcome tonight. And you know the drill on this programme. It's not just about us 3. It's about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? We have lots that we need to discuss, ladies and gents. And you can get involved all the usual ways. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, gbnews.com/your Sarah show. Of course, you can tweet or X me. In just a couple of minutes, I'll get into the Farmers' Summit. Do you think that the Labour Party will change their mind on this tax issue or not? But, of course, there was so much. Will he, won't he, should he, shouldn't they? Today, when it came to politics, what am I talking about? About whether or not the person that was alleged to be a Chinese spy should be named. You had Reform UK saying that if they weren't named, they would essentially perhaps use parliamentary privilege to name the individual accused. Anyway, that didn't happen because the individual was separately named, and I have to say that individual does indeed deny the allegations made against him. But come under the spotlight again as a result is Prince Andrew. I have to say he's a bit of problem child, I'll put it mildly, but he's not allowed to go to Sandringham again this year. He's been asked not to do that. Do you think that's the right move, Alex?
I just think it's profoundly sad what's happened for that family. Of course, his association with Epstein was poisonous and down to him, but nevertheless, there's an element of human tragedy that you can't help but see when families can't spend Christmas together, be they ever so high or ever so low. If you can't be together at Christmas, there's something very sad about it. I just say this about the naming of the spy, alleged spy. For all that you may wish to respect somebody's anonymity in a court system, it becomes a farce in the age of the internet when that person is being named in other countries at will. Because right across Europe, in the United States, in Asia, this person's name was out there for people to see. So I think this individual example is almost neither here nor there. The name was going to come out eventually. We're going to have to revisit the way we look at these laws about what you can name and not in the internet age when news is global and law is national.
Chris?
I think the Prince has made a series of very bad decisions, but giving him a time out at Christmas isn't a good idea. I think he needs his family around him. They can give him the advice to get back on the straight and narrow. We talk about time in our family rather than putting people on the naughty step. Let's spend more time and allow those values that we treasure in our royal family to impact him.
Bit of Christian forgiveness, perhaps, for him. What do you make to this Prince Andrew situation? And also, that point, I think it's such a fascinating one as to whether or not the guy that's been accused of being a spy should have been named. I find that really interesting. I've got to say, I do echo your point there, Alex. Life has moved on. Technology has moved on, hasn't it? You guys will have strong opinions on that at home. There'll be some people watching that say, gosh, chance to be away from my family at Christmas would be a fine thing. I can hear some of you shouting that at your screens at home. I hear you. Look, let's talk farmers then, shall we? Because we've covered this story at length, haven't we, about the inheritance tax changes. We've been right front and centre of the process that have taken place in central London. Then today, the farmers have come back to London again, this time indoors. I'm sure they'll be pleased about that because it's been really quite cold. Again, lobbying the government to try and reverse their so-called family farm tax. I can tell you now, Kemi Badenoch, she didn't miss the opportunity to take to the stage and speak out. Let's listen to what she had to say.
Everyone knows how hard it is to keep a farm going, and it is often only the people within the family who understand how the business works and how to keep it surviving. And so that's why we're really disappointed that Labour is cutting that 100% relief for assets over £1 million. We know that scrapping BPR is going to be incredibly damaging, and that is why today I can tell you that we will reverse this damaging tax grab at the earliest opportunity.
I thought she'd already said that previously, hadn't she?
Yeah, but it's good to say it to the people that are affected most by it. And so I welcomed Kemi Badenoch's remarks there. Discussion on this policy is a bit like buses. You don't get anything for a while, and you get three significant interventions at once, all today. So Dan Needle, first of all. Now, he is an expert. He's Labour. He's open about his links. He's Labour. I'm a Tory. But he took down Nadeem Zahawi, right? So I'm hardly, expected, I think, to be his cheerleader. He absolutely knows his stuff, and he has come out very strongly against this policy and says that the limit should be 20 million, not 1 million. Well, if that were to happen, the big investors in agri would be worried, and the family farmers would be greatly reassured. So Needle was number one. Two was the IFS, the respected Institute for Fiscal Studies, as they're always called in our media, who say it is, their words, very likely that the current policy will affect family farms. That's completely contrary to the government's past statements about who it would affect. And that, I can't help but notice, the BBC Verify position on these family farms used to support the government has now been taken down after the IFS came out against it. And thirdly and lastly, CBI Economics who say that the drop in investment in farming and job losses that would come about as a result means that the Treasury would lose more than they gain from this policy. You take those three interventions together today, and I think the government's got to reverse course.
I'll come back to you in a second to ask whether or not you think they will. Chris, your thoughts?
I think they should reverse this tax, and it's become politically difficult to ever change your mind in government. But actually, for most of us, we realise when we have made a bad decision, it's better to do that quickly. We've got more information now. The previous tax was just too much of a blunt instrument. It wasn't able to go after the agribusiness, and it did impede local farm holders from getting the support that they need. So I'm up for it, but it's become so hard because if they do change their minds, they'll just be jumped on by everybody for being stupid and flip-flopping.
Well, but some of the jump on, to use your language, will be because how was this even a priority? So let's just, in case you're not familiar with this, it's estimated to raise about 500 million quid. Many people will also point to things like in the foreign aid spend, we give about there or thereabouts about 500 million quid to foreign farmers to focus on things like their net zero efforts and stuff like that. So you'll have many people that will say, well, this was a strange priority in the first place. Many other people that will say it was quite obvious that the calculations of this were either not done properly or misunderstood. So this should never have been a thing in the first place.
I think you're right. I think neither should the two-child benefit cap, neither should the winter fuel payments. And sadly, Labour have dug in every time they've been challenged, even when the facts are on the table. But it feels like that's the way politics is today. You don't change your mind even after you've made a bad decision.
I think they will here, but not for any of the reasons we're discussing. Right? So I mentioned Needle. It says you've got the level wrong. I mentioned the IFS. They say you've got the target wrong. It will hit family farms. And I mentioned the CBI economics, who say you got the benefit wrong. It's going to actually cost you more than you're going to get. They won't reverse course for any of those reasons. I think they'll reverse course because for the first time in a generation, Labour's got some representation in rural communities. And some of their members of Parliament are going to say, if you carry on down this path, and you've got a wide majority but quite shallow, I'm going to lose my seat. And the pressure within the Labour Party, combined with the external media pressure and this kind of noise, that's what will lead them to reverse seats. And the most important reason by miles in their minds will be losing seats in rural communities.
And when you say they'll change their mind, what do you think we'll see then? Do you think we'll see a scrapping of the policy or something like the likes of Dan, for example, was suggesting today, which is to raise, and the farmers today at the summit also calling for that threshold to be raised? Look,
they say currently 1 million, right? And bear in mind, Reeves got this wrong, by the way, when she did the media round. She said, oh, you can use your married couples allowance to equal 2 million. Not true. You know, it's 1 million is the limit, right? They say 1 million currently. Needle says 20. I reckon they'll wind up at around 5, for argument's sake, which will exempt many of not all, but will exempt many of family farms in this country.
And what do you see the outcome as being?
I'm hoping you're right. I'm hoping they won't dig in because they haven't budged an inch on winter fuel payments or the two-child benefit cap, even though they were incredibly unpopular.
It just seems like such a strange set of priority choices. Like the first thing that you do is we're going to take from the pensioners, take from the farmers. It's just such a strange priority for Labour. But we always spoke about this previously, didn't we? They boxed themselves into a corner when it became, we're not going to raise this tax, that tax, the other tax, when it came to so-called working people. Do you think they should change their course? And if so, what should that new course look like? What do you think, to Chris's point as well, about the media, essentially? If we made it quite challenging for politicians to actually be able to come out and say, you know what, I got this wrong or whatever, and I'm going to U-turn. Are we part of the problem? Get in touch and let me know. There's not a lot of sympathy for Prince Andrew. Carol has said, Michelle, Prince Andrew has had far too many chances. A lot of people believing in family and forgiveness and all the rest of it, but suggest that he perhaps pushed it just a bit too far. Coming up in the programme, lots of you are getting in touch on this one as well. Smacking children. I want to ask you about this. Of course, the Sarah Sharif situation, awful. Is banning smacking children in England the answer to that? But coming up after the next break, we've got the biggest shake-up in local authority for about 50 years. Is it the right priority, the right focus, and will it have a good impact or not? I'll see you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Joined by international life coach Cheryl Findlay, who has joined forces with a Liverpool business owner, Kate Hill, of sustainable sportswear brand Lola Star, to empower women and inspire women across the nation. And to celebrate this partnership with the new Lola Star collection, the two will be hosting an exclusive event next Saturday.
The sportswear brand was launched after, well, your story. You lost how much weight?
So 16 stone, which is over 220 pounds, which
wow.
I know is quite significant. But during that kind of decade-long journey, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about what it takes to be successful, to be happy, to be well, and to just live an incredible life every day.
Are you giving them goals to work towards or helping them structure their life?
Yeah, so I don't give out goals, absolutely not. It's all about whatever an individual wants. So what we do to begin with is we understand, like, where are you now? Where are you thriving? Where do you feel really happy and excited in your life? And what's lacking? Like, where would you like to feel better? Where would you like to improve? And then we take it from there.
So I'd love to take that on board. I'd love to be my true self and fulfil my potential. So have you got any practical tips on how to do that?
Yeah, so we start with clarity, right? Like, you need to know, it's such a busy, fast-paced world we live in. There's so much sensory overload. You know, it'd be so easy to be distracted. So we need to kind of quiet all that noise down and start with, where do I want to focus? Pick 2 or 3 things. Where do I want to focus? And then we define the goal. What would I like that area of my life to look, not just look like, but feel like? And then we take it from there. So that's where you would start. I actually had a cancer diagnosis in 2019.
Oh.
And I just decided if I was going to be lucky enough to be on the other side of it, I wasn't going to play small anymore.
GB News, the people's...
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel remain Alex Dean and Krish Kandaya, the cultural commentator now. Lots of you getting in touch. I ended the topic before the break by saying there's not a lot of sympathy for Prince Andrew. That has continued throughout the break, to put it mildly, shall we say. Let's talk, though, about changing things up, because local authorities, we often speak about things like devolution, levelling up, whatever you want to call it, and there's often, there seems to be reviews and strategies all over the place. But now Angela Rayner has been announcing what many people are calling the biggest shake-up to local authorities in 50 years. Let's take a listen.
We will truly empower the local champions who understand their area, its identity, its strengths, and how to harness them. It sounds simple, but it's never been done. But ultimately, our aim is mayoral devolution over areas of genuine strategic scale. Today I'm announcing unprecedented new powers for mayors, equipping them with stronger levers to drive growth in their communities.
You got it? So are you a fan of your local mayor? If you've got one, do you want to see them being empowered more or not? Alex Dean, you indeed were a local councillor.
I was a councillor for several years. We, of course, have a mayor where I live. He's called Sadiq Khan. I think he's a terrible mayor, but I still think having a mayor is a good thing. I also think I don't believe, this may sound unconservative, there aren't sacred cows for me in local government, and I think people who get hung up on saying change must never happen are wrong. Now, you were questioning before whether the Labour Party's got its policy priorities right. You were right about the farmers, they shouldn't be hitting them, but they're right to go at local government now if they're going to do it, early in the Parliament, when their majority is at its strongest, when their political strength is at its height, and when they get the time to get the benefit of the policy taking place. I just think they're aiming now at the wrong policies. Earlier this year, they were talking about adding new bands to council tax. That's a reasonable thing to do. It's mad, in my view, and this is going to trigger all manner of your viewers, right? It's mad that somebody pays the same council tax on a £15 million house as someone who has a £1.5 million house. And viewers may, in parts of the country, may be aghast at this, but a £1 million house in London is a family home, right? So the same idea, that's the same council tax bracket, for argument's sake. £50 million house is paying the same council tax as someone on 1.5. That's crazy. We should have new council tax bands, and people in both parties have entered into a knowing conspiracy against the public, not raising it in line with inflation and not raising it as property prices have gone up because they don't want to confront the electorate with it. That's what they should be doing. Restructuring, you're not going to get much benefit from it. The same bureaucrats will replicate themselves. The costs will go up because they'll say they need more money because they're representing more people. You get rid of a bit of duplication, but it's marginal. It's right to reform local government. It should be properly funded in a way that it's not now. I think they're right to try to do it. They're doing the wrong things currently.
Chris?
I think we should give it a try. I think it is broken currently. There's been this fight between central government and local government. We saw it recently, the house building targets. Government saying if local authorities get in the way, they'll come down on them very hard. But this sounds like empowerment. It sounds like local people knowing the best decisions for local communities. So I'm really positive about the idea. I'm so frustrated with my local councils. I've been done 3 times in a bus lane. And I understand why they are needing to generate money, because there is not enough money coming in. So they're targeting the motorists, right?
It's revenue raising.
And it's wicked. Like there is no chance.
All of the story there, though, is get out the bus lane. I mean, I hate to be blunt, but you'd save yourself a fortune.
I would, yes. But I wonder how many of your viewers have been caught when the signage was bad, they didn't understand what was going on.
When you pose no danger to anyone.
Yeah,
exactly. A friend of mine has got charged £1,000 because he was having bills sent to the wrong address and the bailiff's coming around to take his car away. But I get it. There is no money in local authorities and therefore they're using every lever they can to try and generate revenue. So something needs to change.
So what about Alex's idea then? Where Alex is saying you could essentially revalue or reband or whatever. Is that the revenue raiser?
I think we need... I had a real challenge trying to get the local council to think about land it was not using well. We've been talking recently, haven't we, about the lack of housing across the country. What they say, 4.3 million house shortage across the country. I was trying to get local councils to look at the land above their car parks, open-air car parks, right? They're not doing any good to anybody, but all the planning regulations, all the stipulations from central government about how money needed to be used meant there was no room for innovation from a local authority. Give them more power, I think we could see some change.
Government does have a point about the way that people are able to object to planning proposals. In London, we had a series of new tube stations, the Jubilee line being the most obvious, which were designed to have buildings on top of them. Resources weren't there at the time, so you got these little stumps built instead of the building on top. Now, when businesses apply to do the buildings that the site was designed for, people who live locally say no. They oppose it, and they win. It's just absolutely crazy, right? But that has got to change. And so Labour's got a point on that. But I just think they're not focusing on the fundamental dynamic, which is councils at the moment are expected to take up so much of the burden on social care, and they're not enabled to keep some of the revenue that is raised in this country sent to Westminster and then perhaps graciously given back to councils, and you're supposed to feel grateful for it. That's got to change, not least because councils are going to go bust through no fault of their own, because they're going to go bust because of the increasing cost of social care.
Yeah.
You might not like me very much when I say this, because to you, local authority, you've been a councillor, it's obviously very important. I've never in all my life turned out and voted at a local council election. Never. And I seem to be in the majority, because when you look at the turnout for these things, it's minuscule.
I regard that as a great shame, and I hope I can convince you over years that local government matters. But for the time being, the fundamental premise here that larger authorities will attract larger turnout, that for me is quite questionable. I think you've got to develop the sense of recognition and sense of representation amongst your elected leaders, and that's more likely, it seems to me, at least on principle, the smaller the area is and the more you feel like they're in touch with you.
How do you think you can increase turnout at local council elections?
I think we are living in relatively isolated societies now, aren't we? So my nephew, he moved to Basingstoke 3 years ago. He uses it as a dormitory, basically. He commutes to work, comes back again, commutes to... He knows nobody in his community, feels very lonely and isolated. He has no connection with Basingstoke. I think many people feel that way, and therefore they're not involved in local politics because they've got no skin in the game. They're hardly there. So how can we help our communities to feel more grounded, to care about where they are? David Goodhart had an interesting book where he called it The Road to Nowhere, and he talked about somewheres and
nowheres. Citizens of nowhere. Yeah, citizens
somewheres
of
and nowheres. And we're increasingly citizens of nowhere. We don't feel connected to the communities we live in. And so I think that's a systemic, endemic issue. And I think we need more commitment into our local communities.
Let me ask you this. One of my viewers on Twitter has said to you, Alex, about your idea about council tax increases, perhaps for bigger houses. He says it shouldn't be based on property size. It should be based on individuals. He says you can have a small house that's been packed full of people. You can have a bigger house that someone perhaps might live alone, is, I think, the point that Boyd is making. What do you say to that?
I'm up for the question about what reform we should have, but it's clear to me that the current banding doesn't work, not least because it's been fundamentally unadjusted since the 90s. And whilst they go up a bit with inflation, but no one goes around and says, actually, is this house worth any more? And the challenge is, well, it's like the census. Gosh, it's all a bit too difficult. Let's not bother. The beauty of doing higher bandings in the increasingly large top band is you only have to look at those and say, actually, this £25 million mansion belongs in a band higher than the one it's in currently.
Do you live in a £25 million mansion? And if you do you agree with what Alex Dean's saying or not? Do you live in a smaller property that for you just feels like a basic property, but for other people they might look on and go, well, actually, that is very palatial. It's some kind of mansion. Would you be happy to pay more or not? And speaking of paying more, do you actually feel that you get value for money when it comes to what you pay already? I suspect the answer from many people out there will be absolutely no. Coming up after the break, I want to ask you, do you think it's time to ban the smacking of children in England? This is in the wake of that awful murder of little Sarah Sharif. And I also want to talk to you as well about the woman that chucked a milkshake at Nigel Farage. She avoided jail. Farage thinks that is evidence of two-tiered justice system. Is it or not? See you in 2.
Good evening. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News. Whilst it is going to stay mild for many of us as we go into tomorrow, there will be some wet and windy weather to come. That's because there is currently a system waiting out in the Atlantic, but ahead of this, we do currently have a front that's been lingering across some parts of northern Scotland and has already brought a fair amount of rain. That rain is going to ease as we go through tonight and into tomorrow morning. Otherwise, across other parts of the country, largely dry. Quite a bit of cloud coming in from the west, but some clear skies towards eastern parts in particular. And that cloud will do two things. Could bring some hill fog to parts of the south, and also it means our temperatures aren't going to drop. So it is going to be a mild and blustery start to the day for some of us tomorrow. As we go through tomorrow morning, then yes, quite a dry start across many parts of central southern England and Wales. A few spots of rain where the clouds thick enough, and like I said, could be a bit murky. Some hill fog to watch out for too. Further north, across Northern Ireland and many parts of Scotland, outbreaks of rain already pushing their way through as we go through tomorrow morning. None of it looks particularly heavy at this point, but the rain is going to become a bit more persistent, a bit heavier as we go through the day. So we could see some spray on the roads and other travel disruption is possible. As well as the rain coming through, the winds will be strengthening as we go through the day. Risk of gales around coastal parts and towards the northwest. All the time towards the southeast, staying drier and some glimmers of sunshine as well. Temperatures above average for the time of year, most places getting into double figures, so feeling pretty mild. That rain eventually pushes through overnight into Wednesday, and then Wednesday we have a bit of a cloudy, at times damp story across much of England and Wales. A bit brighter for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but plenty of blustery showers pushing their way through. Some further wet weather to come at times as we go through Thursday and Friday, but also some sunshine. Notice, however, our temperatures are going to markedly drop. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel. Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratton, and major problems in Cheshire for the M53. The motorway is partly blocked northbound at junction 9, the Ellesmere Port turn-off, and the scene of an accident involving a couple of lorries. And staying in Cheshire to the northeast of Crewe, the A534 is closed between the Wheelock roundabout and the Crewe Green roundabout. There's been an accident involving 2 cars that's being investigated. Just south of Birmingham City Centre, in the Midlands obviously, the A38 at Northfield closed for investigation work following a serious collision at the Black Horse Junction. On the M1 in Northamptonshire, the northbound entry slip road closed off just after 16, the Daventry turn off the A45. Emergency repair works are underway after a lorry caught fire. The Essex stretch of the M25 closed anti-clockwise at junction 28 of the A12 for accident investigation work, and there are delays of an hour on trains in the West Country through Swindon due to earlier signalling problems. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Good evening if you are just joining us. Alongside me, my panel, Alex Dean, the political consultant, and Krish Kwandaya, the cultural commentator. Lots of you getting in touch about those previous conversations that we've been having. But look, this story stopped me in my tracks, so it did. I say to you guys at home, often we live in some kind of weird clown world. Well, listen to this. A convicted terrorist, you heard that right, is reportedly trying to sue a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, saying he was, I quote, deeply offended by its sign. He basically reckons that this picture depicts a bearded Arab, suggesting that it incites violence. I mean, I will actually repeat what I just said at the start of that sentence, everybody. This is a fella that has been jailed, apparently, for preparing jihad propaganda. Excuse me? You are worried about a sign inciting violence. But it's all right, everyone, don't worry, because apparently he, quote, has left all that terrorism stuff behind him now. Oh, that's all right then.
Well,
Alex Dean.
I mean, credit where it's due. He's an expert on inciting violence, saying the court has convicted him of distributing jihadist propaganda. So, although, as you rightly say, in the sweetest sign-off I've seen of late, I've stopped all the terrorism stuff now. I mean, how reassuring. You would think if someone was bothered by this pub and its name, which it's had for 500 years, they might choose a better spokesman for it. They might find a better figurehead for it in complaining about the Saracen's Head than someone who has been convicted himself for distributing jihadist propaganda. I think there's nothing wrong with this pub's name. The consequence, if you are offended by something, is that you are offended. That's it.
Why do we feel that we have got the right there to walk around this society being unoffended, whether that offence is genuine or, you know, perhaps not?
I don't think we should have that feeling that we should never feel offended. That's crazy. It's a non-story, this. It's a bit like when some councils were rebranding Christmas Winterval because they were worried about offending Muslims. I never met a Muslim who was upset about calling anything Christmas. So it's offensive.
Honestly, I just sometimes, ladies and gents, you just sit there and you just think, what is this society coming to? You know what, if you see that picture, it offends you, jog on, keep going, keep walking. That's what I say. But look, it's a very serious story that I want to talk to you about tonight. We all know, of course, the horrific murder. We covered it, didn't we, in detail, Sarah Sharif. It sparked so many conversations on so many different levels. She was taken out of school, she was homeschooled, many people saying that all needs a review as well. But now the Children's Commissioner, she's come out and basically said that she wants MPs to now push forward a ban on smacking children here in England. I've got to say, of course, there's already a ban on smacking in lots of different parts of the country already, but not, crucially, here. There's so much I want to get into on this. I think it's such an important and interesting topic. There's many people already who've got in touch, basically saying that this is essentially overreach, that parents should be able to lightly smack their child if they think that is discipline within their family, etc. Where are you on this, Krish?
I'm for a smacking ban. I think it's worth doing to protect children. Now, you might be a lovely parent, and of course you're going to do a gentle smack, but once you open the door, you allow other bad things to happen. So I think for the sake of other children, let's do it. I was in the Salvation Army when I was a child, and they decided not to drink alcohol because they worked with so many people who had alcohol problems. So they'd said, we'll do something hard here to help a wider group over there. I think it's worth us taking that little difficulty in our lives and stopping smacking children in order to protect a wider group. But I don't think this smacking ban is the solution to the problem we've got when you see that terrible murder of Sarah Sharif. I think we've got a huge problem with our children's social care system, and we need serious reform there. We have a massive shortage of social workers, of foster parents, and I wouldn't want that wider problem to get lost in this focus on smacking.
I want to come back to that because I know that you are a foster carer as well, which I really respect and admire. So I want to explore that in a second. But let me just play the clip for you all at home. You'll be familiar with this. This was the recording of Sarah Sharif's father. Listen to what he had to say.
Take a deep breath and tell me what's happened.
I cannot. I physically punished my daughter and she died.
Your daughter has died?
I killed my daughter.
How have you killed your daughter?
I beat her up. It wasn't my intention to kill her, but I beat her up too much.
You disgusting human being. But the line that caught me there, Alex, was where he was saying, I legally punished my daughter. So we will all understand, and we all know this case is just so horrific, it upsets me even when I think of the details. We know he went way beyond. But the starting point for this guy seems to be in his own little puggled mind that he was legally punishing.
And that is not a defence that would stand up for a moment in anyone's mind. Whatever your views on smacking children by parents, it is perverse to use the murder of a little girl as an argument against lawful chastisement, whatever he says. The idea that someone who would beat their child to death would change their behaviour because of the law on smacking is an abuse of this girl's memory, and it's farcical to allow it to go unpointed, not be pointed out in the public space. The idea that if a smack was banned, this guy who bludgeoned his daughter to death would behave differently is perverse, and it's being pushed, I'm afraid, by people who've always wanted this as the result of their agenda. There's completely respectable, it's honourable not to want smacking in society, but it is outrageous to use this girl's death as the vehicle by which to seek to deliver it, because the solution they have identified is in no way connected to the problem we are discussing. The Children's Commissioner said in her statements today that this child was someone profoundly failed by the social safety net. True. She is someone in such a bad situation at home that she was identified to social services as a risk before she was even born. True. And therefore we should ban smacking. Yeah. There is no connection between these things, and to use these things to get to an agenda that you always wanted to have is completely wrong, and it's fundamentally dishonest.
So you don't like the connection of the two cases, but are you for or against the ban on smacking in England?
I accept the premise that some people seek to hide behind it, and behind lawful chastisement. I also accept the premise that some people who are good parents, need to behave in different ways in order to benefit society as a whole. I'm reluctant to say I'm in favour of an outright ban because of my instincts that parents know best, generally speaking, how to raise their children, and we're too statist to start with. But I think there's some force in these discussions. I just want us to have them honestly, and I'm afraid, I want to put my position clearly. The Children's Commissioner is taking a position that is fundamentally dishonest and seeking to use the death of this girl to deliver an agenda that she's wanted to have for a long time.
What do you think to that point, Krish?
I can see Alex's argument, and I wish these two things weren't conflated. I think let's have a conversation about smacking, but I guess, why is she doing it now? Now it's in the public domain, there seemed to be an opportunity, but I can hear why that might be seen to be a dishonest way forward. I think we've got to have the bigger conversation. Our social services are not working for children, and let's not get distracted by fixing smacking one way or another. Let's fix social services. Local authorities are struggling in debt. The children's social care is a huge part of that. Some of that is because the money is going to for-profit fostering associations. Some of it is because we're not recruiting or retaining our social workers, our foster parents. It's going wrong, and we haven't really had any ambitious plans to try and fix it.
To make it clear, we could fix the social service problem you're identifying and leave the law on smacking unchanged, or we could change the law on smacking and leave social services a failure. They are entirely disconnected.
Yeah.
I mean, on balance, I'm probably in favour of a ban on smacking, but it's so fundamentally disconnected from the profound failure we have as a society towards children. It's hiding behind a false premise, and there's something deeply dishonest about it.
One of the other conversations that's come off the back of the murder of this little girl is about homeschooling. I mean, I don't even know, in just basic common sense land, why you would allow a child who has been known to social services, at risk, you know the family background, whatever, to allow a child like that to be removed from the school system and guess what, you know what, we just decided to homeschool our child. I mean, that just defies logic, common sense and all the rest of it. But that is what's happened, and many people now are saying that what we need is a register, essentially, of homeschooled children, and also any child that's been in the social services situation that Sarah was in, you should be required to get local authority permission before you can put them in homeschooling. What do you think to that?
I'm open to that as well, but again, I think it's similar to the smacking. It's conflating two issues that don't necessarily need to be put together again. There are a lot of reasons why people need to homeschool their children. The recent study said 27% of children who are being homeschooled are because their schools aren't providing for their social or mental health, or they're not helping them with their special educational needs. Lots of parents would love their children to be in school, but no school is able to provide the support they can. So that's separate, but I do think we need to know what's happening to children. In lockdown, there was a huge spike in domestic violence and no one was seeing children. School is often the place where people are noticing bruises, children turned in on themselves, experiencing kind of anxiety because of stuff that's going on at home. So we need to see children in order to keep them safe.
The number of people who are homeschooling their children was inevitably going to go up because we forcibly made people homeschool for an extended period of time during lockdown, and it's just inevitable that some people will have liked it. So there are some good reasons, right? There are some loving parents who want to educate their children at home and think it's for the best of them. But there is a bad side to this, which is the number is going to go up, whether or not we want it to, because of the government's policy on VAT on independent schools. And that 20% addition means some schools are going to close, and some parents who had their children there will say, right, that's it then. Especially if they were educating their children, they've chosen to educate their children in a religious tradition, and that is now no longer available to them or much harder. And they will say, I'm going to educate my child at home. Now, for some people that will be fine. For other people, it will mean going out of the public eye and not being seen by those who need to know what's going on in a family.
And don't forget, of course, you mentioned the private school fees. One of the groups of people, the children, that will be so harshly affected by this are the people that you mentioned, Chris, that have got special educational needs, that don't get their needs met mainstream, so they have to go to these private schools. But because they haven't got the piece of paper, those guys won't be given much help at all. I feel so sorry for those children. I've got to tell you as well, the primary reason for homeschooling in this country is philosophical. I mean, you'll have a lot to say about that. I've got a lot of thoughts on that one. What do you think to some of the things you've just been hearing? Get in touch and let me know after the break. Nigel Farage, we know this story. He was hit by a milkshake when he was campaigning. Should the person that did it have gone to prison? She didn't. Nigel Farage says that is evidence of a two-tier justice system. And also, apparently, Harriet Harman, she reckons that Reform UK themselves are a threat to democracy. What do you think to that? I'll see you in 2.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Restaurant St. Bart's executive head chef Johnny Crowe creates ramen with a British twist, using only the finest UK-sourced produce. As the only restaurant in London to hold both a Michelin star and a green Michelin star, St. Bart's emphasises sustainability and the diversity of British ingredients. Johnny joins me now. Johnny, congratulations on having these 2 Michelins. How do you get a Michelin green star?
Probably a better question for the inspectors, but I mean, I think it's down to a lot of hard work.
What hoops do you have to go through?
So I think it's working every day on it. The sustainability isn't something that you just achieve and then therefore you have it and you can sort of relax. It's about every day trying to be better, trying to make a restaurant and a business that is overly sustainable.
So what things do you do to make it sustainable?
One of the main things that we've really tried to do is focusing on British produce, and actually, you know, part of that is about sustainability and food miles. A massive part of it for us was also about sort of helping the British economy and the farming economy and our fisheries as well. But yeah, no, the idea...
I have a lot of farms near St Bart's, which is in the heart of the City of London.
Well, funnily enough, there's an amazing collective called Shrub Provisions, who we use a hell of a lot, who work with farmers all around East Sussex. So it makes a difference from flying it in from Kenya or somewhere else like that. But no, like a big part of it was, one, using British produce to cut down on food miles, but also helping sustain our farming industry.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, Alex Dean and Krish Kandaya remain until 7 o'clock. Lots of you getting in touch. You're quite divided, I've got to say, on that smacking story about whether or not you think that smacking should be banned in England, as it is in other places across the United Kingdom. But you're all united in saying that you don't think it actually would have made a difference in that horrendous, awful, tragic case of little Sarah. Keep your thoughts coming in. Nigel Farage, we'll all be familiar with the fact that he got that milkshake thrown at him when he was campaigning in Clacton. We've followed this case with interest to see what happened to that girl that was accused. Well, we can tell you now, she escaped jail. Nigel Farage has tweeted saying that this, and I quote, "We're living in a country now," he says, "where you can assault a member of parliament and not go to prison. It's the latest example of two-tier justice." Should she have gone to prison, Alex Dean?
I think, whilst I didn't hear the evidence, I didn't hear the mitigation that was offered on her behalf, which may have been powerful. It seems to me the judge probably got this right. She received a prison sentence which was suspended, and if she misbehaves again, it'll be activated, and she will see the inside of prison for both offences. Now, of course, your fellow presenter on this channel, to take you to task, you said before we went to the break, you said he was hit by a milkshake. He wasn't. He was assaulted by a person who used a milkshake to throw it on him. I think the most important thing wasn't whether she went to prison. It was to make it clear to society today that it's not OK to do this to politicians any more than to anyone else.
This is weird footage, by the way. Sorry to interrupt. I'm listening, but so just in case you're not watching this, you've got the court footage of both of them there at the same time. Is that a bit weird?
That happens often in the court system. But look, it was necessary to make clear the message that it's not acceptable to throw milkshakes on people any more than it's acceptable to throw other things at them, not least because some commentators like Owen Jones have spoken positively about so-called milkshaking politicians. It's completely wrong. It's corrosive. It erodes the democratic process. To suggest that politicians are legitimate targets is a very, very slippery and unattractive slope. It was right that she got convicted. I think the sentence is probably about right.
Chris?
I don't think it's two-tier at all. I did some research and I couldn't find anyone that's ever been jailed for throwing a milkshake or even egging a politician. Remember John Prescott had eggs thrown at him and he punched someone? That guy didn't get prison.
Well, let me intervene. because lucky for you all, I did my homework as well, ladies and gents, and I have found a case.
Where was it?
Where somebody, let me show you, this is the Prescott thing you're watching now. Let me show you this Jeremy Corbyn situation. So this one, ladies and gents, was back in 2000. Kind of keep your eye at the bottom of the screen. You'll see this fella walks up to Jeremy Corbyn. Have you seen that? He whacks a head on, he whacks an egg on the guy's head. He was jailed.
I'm going to just say a few things about that without knowing any more than that footage. First of all, the person actually makes contact with him. It's not just throwing an egg. It's basically hitting someone whilst you've got an egg in your hand, and that may have made a difference. The second thing is that we have no idea about the antecedents of the individuals concerned. The person you've just shown us in that footage, you can't make out. I'm not defaming the person. I have no idea. I think it's a bloke, but I can't tell you anything more than that.
Yeah,
for all we know, he's got a criminal record as long as your arm, and therefore he's going to be treated differently by a court to someone who, for all I know, in Victoria Bowen's case, the person who assaulted Nigel Farage, may have been a first-time offender. So, you know, there are all manner of things that go on in the course of sentencing someone which can make a difference, about which our knowledge is imperfect.
And I actually thought that the Prescott guy was jailed as well.
OK.
You guys are on it at home.
I did my typing.
You've got one that thinks he wasn't, and one that thinks he was. You guys, you don't mess around at home. You'll figure it out. You'll tell me what happened.
But I do want to live in a society where politicians, whatever their views, have freedom to say what they need to say, without debate about it. That's right.
Absolutely right.
And
but
particularly
where do you draw the line? Because the guy that got jailed for attacking Jeremy Corbyn with that egg that I've just said to you, when you look at the sentencing remarks of that, the judge there said the sentence was to reflect the fact that it was an attack on democracy. That's how they interpreted. So it wasn't the fact that the egg had connected with the head or whatever. It was the fact that attacking an MP like this was essentially, in that judge's mind, an attack on democracy.
Yeah, I've got a problem with that. I believe in freedom of speech, but that works both ways. I think politicians should be able to say what they need to say, and I think there's a right to protest too. And if we start clamping down on protest too heavily, would we have had the suffragettes? They did some pretty, difficult things, throwing stones at carriages and windows and...
Well, let me, we speak about democracy. Let me just remind you of something that Harriet Harman had to say about Reform UK at the weekend. I think I've got a clip.
Well, I think people should be very concerned about reform because they're not just a threat to individual parties, but I actually think they're a threat to democracy because they are offering easy answers.
Do you think that?
No, I don't. I think say they're a threat to democracy. Look, I'm a Conservative. Reform stood against me at the last election. They took votes that I would have hoped to have won. I don't wish them well electorally. To suggest that they are a threat to our democracy is daft. What she means is I don't like them and I don't like what they stand for. Well, the solution to that in a democratic society is to fight against them and seek to beat them in an election, not to suggest or imply somehow that they suborn democracy itself and undermine it. In fact, that's what you're doing when you say that someone is somehow less entitled to express their views than you are. And indeed, I can't help but note the irony. It's the same week that Harriet Harman says this ridiculous thing, and Labour, with their local government proposals, potentially inadvertently, look like they're going to delay the local government elections next year in these areas. The only threat to democracy right now, with good reason one understands, is the Labour government.
Chris?
I think we end up throwing this term threat to democracy around quite a lot. We saw it in the US elections. We're seeing it here. I definitely think Reform are changing the way we do politics in a way that I don't particularly like.
Sure.
But I don't think that's the same as being a threat to democracy.
If you dial up the rhetoric to 100, what are you going to do when the real bad guys emerge and you have exhausted all your vituperative vocabulary and suggested that these people are the worst of the worst? You know, it's like people go around calling everyone far right and fascist. What are they going to do if they actually see a real fascist? What are they going to do if someone who's actually of the far right pops up one day? They will have cried wolf so many times, and Harriet Harman should know better.
You see, I think it's very deliberate, though, Chris. These kind of... it's almost like the slurs, the smears. For me, it's intended to try and shame people. Maybe I shouldn't vote for them then if they are far right or if they're trying to ruin democracy or what. It was when Donald Trump... I mean, I shouldn't laugh because it's serious, but when Donald Trump got elected and people were saying he's going to cancel democracy, you'll never get a vote again.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about? You sound ridiculous.
I'm going to argue against myself, I guess. I'm interested that Reform are having such cut-through with young voters, voters that don't normally turn up at all. So he is doing something to empower democracy in places where we've really struggled. I think the mainline parties, if you want to call them that, need to wake up to a new form of democracy, but we shouldn't decry them as being undemocratic.
The right way to do it is to tackle them and seek to beat them in an election, not imply you've got some kind of moral superiority.
Well, there you go. You will have the final say on that reform one. Lots of people saying that there are evidence of two-tier justice, and you think that that lady should have gone to prison. Speaking of prison, I was right. The fellow that egged John Prescott did indeed go to prison. That's all I've got time for. Thanks, gents. Thanks to you at home. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow night.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening.